So let's talk about this thing called earnest money. What is that? Hey, my name is Glenice Johnson with artformhomes and EXP Realty, and I am an artist and a realtor serving the greater Birmingham area. Let me go ahead and start off by saying, before I was an agent, I didn't even know earnest money existed. So if this is a foreign concept to you, please don't feel bad, because I didn't know it took all this in my house. I didn't. But anyway, let's get into it. So earnest money is basically money that you kind of put up you put out up front with the offer. Now, when you hear up front, you're thinking like the down payment. No, it's not a down payment. And technically, the down payment is not money you're actually putting up front, because you put it up at the end as a part of your closing costs when you close the deal. Anyways, besides the point. So earnest money is basically like a good faith deposit that you put with your offer. And it's a little risky. It's kind of a gamble. A lot of times the phrase that, ever since I've been in the business, the phrase that's been commonly associated with earnest money is skin in the game. You're putting your skin in the game, because again, it's a little risky. So it's not mandatory. It is not mandatory. However, we're in this thing called a seller's market. And you may more than likely, more often than not, be in competition with other buyers. So to not put up earnest money when all these other buyers are probably putting up earnest money, you literally you might as well forfeit your offer. It's not going to get taken seriously, right? So it's a great tool for negotiation. It's a great tool for offer attractiveness. So we talk about earnest money. Okay, what's a good amount for earnest money? Rule of thumb, from what I've seen and what I've utilized, what I've strategized. Rule of thumb is good 1% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a house for $200,000, $2,000 is your good. It's a good area for your earnest money. Now, of course, you can always give more. Again, it's a great point of attractiveness and negotiation. So if you want to be competitive, offering more earnest money is always a great way to go. And of course, if you wanted to, you can offer less, but much like not having it at all, if you're only giving a couple $100 and all of these other offers are giving at least 1% or more, it's not going to be taken seriously, right? So when you put up earnest money, let's say you put up earnest money with an offer, that offer is accepted and finalized, you have 3 days. 3 days to submit that check, that earnest money check, into an escrow account. Now, if you do not submit this in that 3 days, contract's canceled. Contract is over. It's void. Now, don't let that panic you, because a lot of times, I can't speak for other for every agent, but I know me. A lot of agents tend to take that money. They'll take the check from you, and a lot of times their broker is able to get it submitted into that escrow account. So that part of figuring out how to get it, it can be, you'll know that before you have to submit it. You know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure if you got a good agent, they're gonna let you know how that's gonna go, what you're gonna do, who you're gonna give it to, and all that good stuff. So, but yeah, know that you have 3 days. So it's not necessarily a matter of the logistics of getting the check from one place to another. It's having the money on hand and in an account that can be pulled out, immediately. That's what I mean by that, making sure you're able to do that. The good thing is with earnest money, it is credited to you at the end of the deal. So when you're at the closing table, if you put up $2,000 in earnest money, you can basically subtract that from your old closing costs at the closing table. So you're essentially paying for it in a deal that works out and works really good. You're essentially paying a huge chunk of your closing costs literally at the front end of the deal, which is great. That's great. Now, earnest money, like I said, it can be tricky, because there is something called a mutual release that is required in the case that deals don't actually come through. If they fall apart, both parties have to sign what's called a mutual release, even in the case of legitimate breakdown. And I'm going to explain legitimate in a second. So you got to sign, both parties have to be in agreement, sign a mutual release, and then the earnest money goes to whatever party they agreed is going to go to. Now, when I say in a legitimate, situation or a legitimate reason for the deal to fall through, I'm basing that on the 2 contingencies that are allowed in the contract, that if the contract was to fall apart because of these contingencies, you're in good standing to get that earnest money back. And that is for inspections and financing contingencies. So like with inspections, if you perform inspections and there's a major repair issue and the seller just flat out declines to do it, and you're not comfortable moving forward in that deal in light of them not doing that repair, that's a contingency that you can walk away from. And that contract is set up where, for more than likely, the seller would sign a mutual release, as well as you would sign that mutual release for you to get your earnest money back. Also with financing, if your financing falls through before the designated date that's situated in your contract, if it falls through and it's within that time frame, same deal. You be able to get your earnest money back after a mutual release is signed, right? Now, for any other reason other than that, that deal falls apart on your end, where you're the one as the buyer pulling out, like for instance, you just being fickle Fred and decide you don't want to buy the house anymore, you're not getting that earnest money back. Because at that point, it will be considered liquidated damages for the seller's trouble. Because that's a major thing to pull out of a residential sales deal. That's a big thing. You don't do that lightly. So if it's for any other reason than those agreed upon approved contingencies, more than likely, and this is, I'm speaking about this in respect to, the weight it has as far as the contract, what the contract is going to allow your agents to negotiate to make sure, you're able to get your earnest money back. Or on the other hand, if the seller feels that, that buyer has pulled out for, fickle reasons, they can get some type of damages so they can move on, right? So, and here's the thing, like I said, it's tricky. You have to sign a mutual release. Now, in my mind, again, when I was learning this in the very beginning to kind of share it with, be able to educate my buyers, this always tripped me up, because again, whether the reason's legitimate or not, both parties still have to sign that mutual release in order for that money to be released to wherever it's gonna go. Okay? So both parties have to agree. So for any reason, now granted, a contract kind of twists the seller's arms if the fall apart of the contract was based on a contingency, and vice versa. If you're kind of just pulling out willy-nilly, that usually you can kind of assume that it's going to be a better, it's going to be negotiated that earnest money doesn't go with you. Just depending on circumstance, it's different. Every situation is unique. I'm just going by just common sense about how things could flow based on what the action is. Doesn't mean it'll always work out that way, but you can kind of assume. But again, a mutual release has to be signed. So for any reason that one of our parties are not in agreement, for whatever reason, even if they see the legitimate things going on with the contract, and for some reason they just refuse to sign the mutual release, one of 3 things can happen. Okay? If we cannot get a signature on that mutual release, number 1, it will stay in that escrow account, that neutral escrow account, forever. It don't go to nobody. It doesn't go to anybody. It will literally just stay there. That tripped me out. It don't go to nobody. It just stays in the escrow account forever. Doesn't get spent. Doesn't get touched. It just stays there. Okay, that's option number 1. Number 2, it can be, and this is all based on Alabama real estate law. So a number 2 option is that it can be interpleaded in the appropriate courts. However, the cost of that will be taken. The funds from the earnest money will be utilized to cover the costs for that litigation, for that to be interpleaded in the courts. So it's kind of like, And then the third thing, of course, is that if it is, I believe it is interpleaded in the courts, it'll be dispersed according to the judgment given in that appropriate court. It'll be dispersed after that. So it's very tricky. And for me, I'm just like, you gotta sign this thing in order for it to, it's tricky. It's a gamble. But have no fear, more often than not, the sale goes to close. More often than not, if it falls apart, it's falling apart because of one of the approved contingency scenarios. So this is, I like to consider the crazy situations that could happen because I always like to be ready for anything. But that's a breakdown of earnest money, of this thing that typically we don't really talk about. If you're kind of contemplating, I'm ready to buy a house, I'm ready to get my family a house, you're thinking about down payment. You may even be familiar with the loan costs, but I know for me that was foreign to me. So I definitely want to make sure you are knowledgeable of another component of this real estate process and the process of purchasing a house, all the things that kind of go into it. So check out the video I posted last week on how to make the best offer. So earnest money is a part of the offer. There are a whole bunch of other things that you can take into account to not only know how to in general make an offer for a real estate purchase, but know how to make the best one, especially if it's going to be competitive, because more than likely it will. So the link to that video is going to be in the description box. As always, I am available. If you got questions and you want to chat, schedule a consultation with me, or email me, text me, whatever you feel comfortable with. Put a comment down below. I'm happy to answer your questions and get in conversation with you so that you can get more clarity about your home buying journey. But that's all I got for today, y'all. Much love, take care, and I'll talk to you later.